You have a PhD in Soviet and Russian history. How do we contain Russia when Vladimir Putin publicly states, you don't mess with Russia, we have nuclear weapons?
President Bush famously said that he had looked into Putin's eyes and seen his soul. After my first meeting with Putin in February of 2007, I reported back to President Bush that I'd looked into President Putin's eyes and I'd seen a stone-cold killer. Putin and I had a kind of an interesting relationship. It was kind of a CIA, KGB relationship, and I, every now and then, just sort of to keep him in his place, would remind him that when he was a junior lieutenant colonel in the KGB stuck in Dresden, East Germany, I was the deputy director of CIA dealing with his boss, the head of the first chief directorate in Moscow. And I will admit that once or twice, purely unintentionally, I referred to him as Colonel instead of Mr. President. Purely just a slip, an accidental slip. But more seriously, first of all, I think we in the West dramatically underestimated the magnitude of the humiliation of the Russians with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Because it wasn't just the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was the collapse of the Russian Empire. And Russia's borders today are roughly coincident with its borders before Catherine the Great. They've lost Ukraine, they've lost Central Asia, all the stands, and so on. And Putin is all about recapturing lost power and lost glory. And the humiliation of those days weighs very heavily on this guy, in my view. So the first thing he's determined to do is reestablish Russia's role as a great power, and that major problems in the world cannot be addressed successfully without Russia at the table. And this, in my view, explains his intervention in Syria. It explains his threats about nuclear power, a reminder that Russia is the second biggest or the equal nuclear power to the United States. The second piece of Putin's strategy, and I would say in Syria it's not just a matter of Russia being at the table, but probably in his view Russia being in the chair and basically running the process. And so far that seems to be working for him. The second piece of the strategy is really as old as the Russian Empire, and that is to reestablish a buffer of either frozen conflicts or friendly states on the periphery of Russia. And that's what Ukraine is all about. It's all about preventing Ukraine from moving into the Western orbit as a member of the EU or a member of NATO. And if it requires Ukraine to be partitioned de facto, and Russia basically calling the shots in eastern Ukraine, so be it. If it requires occupying Crimea, so be it. I will tell you this, as long as Vladimir Putin is alive, Crimea will always be a part of Russia. That they will never negotiate to give it away. So I think these two strategies are basically the core of what Putin is all about, and all of his macho stuff and riding horses bareback. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Mao swimming the Yangtze River in terms of telling his own people that Russia matters again. And it's a narrative. And the other piece of the narrative is that the West is still out to get Russia. And he uses the term that the West, the United States, is out to declaw the Russian bear. We want to get all of their nuclear weapons, and we want them basically to be a vassal state. And this narrative, all of the pieces of this narrative are working, at least at this point, with the Russian people. And although the polls are not reliable, there is no reason to believe that, at least so far, he remains very popular in Russia for all these reasons.